Good morning and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm Dave Westcott, CEO of TransBlue. This is Todd Chapman, Vice President of Franchise Operations. And today we're talking about the hardest day as an entrepreneur. So I got to share mine with you.
Okay.
What's up, Todd?
Hi. Good morning.
I got to share mine with you. So I'm a big Boston Bruins fan, big Bees fan. I love hockey. I love the Bruins. So I go to Boston in 2013, I think is the year, against Chicago Blackhawks. We're up like 2-1 or 2-0 or something like that. And everybody's like, the Bees are going to sweep. The Bees are going to sweep, and they're going to win it or whatever. They're going to win the rest of the games. They're going to sweep the rest of the games. So I'm watching the games and I watch us lose like the next 3 games in a row and we're out. So depressing. Then 2019, we got the Stanley Cup. We're going for it again. Got the Bruins in the finals. We're playing the St. Louis Blues. We should beat them by there's no reason we should be losing the St. Louis Blues. Goes to game 7. I'm in Boston. I've probably spent 20 grand flying and traveling and eating and just hanging out over this. Because it's like, a game every other day for 7 games, right? It's 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been back and forth to Boston and St. Louis. In fact, the hotels in Boston for game 7, the cheapest room I could find in Boston was $950 a night.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm there and I watch this whole thing fall apart on my Bees. And we lose. And we lose in game 7. And now I was lucky enough to get tickets and I was in the players, friends and family and wives section. So I was like maybe 12 or 13 rows from the ice. That was awesome, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But what I didn't know was I was surrounded by the Blues friends and family and wives. And so all the Blues were going crazy in my section. And the whole thing clears out. And the ceremony probably took 15 minutes and then it was over. And so I was thinking about like the most disappointing moments, the hardest days of an entrepreneur. And I think to myself, what goes into owning a professional sports team? Like you have all these players and some of your favorite players play on your favorite teams. And then they get traded or then they get cut. Or, whatever happens, or like to the Boston Bruins last year, Tuukka Rask, the goalie, he jumps ship in the playoff and says, I'm not playing anymore because I want to be safe and healthy for my family, and the Bees lose. And you recently had an experience at the NBA Finals.
I did.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it all worked out well in the end. But we went to game 2 of the NBA Finals. I surprised my son last week. We went to Denver over the weekend. My family's from Denver, and so the Denver Nuggets were in the finals, and first time ever, in their history, like 47 years.
Congrats.
So thanks. And then it was the only game. We went to the only game they lost in the entire playoffs. They think they were like 10-1 for the entire playoffs. We went to the only loss, so that initial disappointment was obviously there when you're live, but the experience was amazing. Obviously first time to the finals, and we ended up winning it last week. So it wasn't amazing. A hard day, but it's there's ups and downs.
There was still some disappointment there.
Yeah, there was.
Even though it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. Especially with the fans. You got the opponent and all their fans going crazy. And talking some trash, which
So you relate it to business, right?
Yep.
Like I love to relate it to business.
Ups and downs.
Like you think about your sports team. I mean, and just like we all love the NFL, or most of us love the NFL, but imagine the money that's spent on choosing an NFL quarterback. Or imagine the money that's spent on choosing Michael Jordan as the point guard for your team, or whatever it is, Imagine how long are they watching these kids? Right? They're watching them from sometimes junior high.
Junior high nowadays.
They're watching them through high school. They're doing full investigations in their life. How do they treat their girlfriend? What does their girlfriend look like? How do they treat their parents? What does their character look like? They're doing all sorts of body testing and everything like that. And I heard a statistic. I was watching ESPN. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I heard that something like if you're going to be a quarterback in the NFL and you get drafted and you are on a team, that team has already spent, whether they spent it on you or somebody else, that pick cost them at minimum $4 million. Just all the travel and the
Scouts.
time and the scouts and all of that investment. And the worst day of our lives in business normally comes around what employees do. This is normally the killer. And as a business owner, you want to scale your business. You want to grow your business. You want to take your business to the next level. And so you have to do that. You have to invest in people. If you don't invest in people, you become a chuck in the truck, where you are obsessively compulsive over maybe the mower lines or the trimming or the way and your work product is perfect, but you don't have great wealth. You work for a salary.
Mm-hmm.
If you get sick, there's no one else there to fix it for you. If you age, as we all do, your body wears out.
Breaks
and
down.
if you don't have a retirement plan in place, you're still a contractor digging holes or doing your job at 70 years old. And you might think that that doesn't happen, but I know many contractors still working at 65, 70 years old. In fact, I just met with a contractor this morning who said, I'm starting a new business. I'm like, dude, you're like 70 years old. My mind is blown, you know?
Yeah.
And we think about the toughest day of our life, and I relate it back to the NFL, and I relate it back to sports, because imagine what that owner of that sports team put into that Boston Bruins team. The millions of dollars to the employees, the millions of dollars in training, the millions of dollars to the players, you know,
Staff, yep.
all of this, and then you lose. And sometimes you lose so great that they fire everybody and they rebuild it and they start over. And how many sports teams do you know where they clean house on the entire crew and they bring in a new crew to revitalize what they're doing? And how many failures at the end of the season, if you don't win the championship, if you don't win the NBA Finals, if you don't win the Stanley Cup, if you don't win the Super Bowl, your season's a failure. It might be a learning lesson. It might be roadblocks and stepping stones to get you where you need to go, but it's a failure for millions and millions and millions of dollars spent. And you think about the thing, and the other statistic that I heard was that only 25% of those quarterbacks last more than 4 years.
The average career, I think, for a player, and I think it's still the same in the NFL, is 3 years.
I didn't even know it was
like
that low.
That's the average career for the normal player. Because you think, I mean, yeah, we know all the stars, but there's so many of these undrafted guys. There's so many of these guys that just get drafted in later rounds that don't make the cut, you know. And you think of this, the investment over the long haul, right?
Yeah.
And the turnover there. So, yeah.
So, toughest day in business. I'm going to take you back. Got to do it. Got to take you back. Toughest day. One of the toughest days. I mean, it's funny because this was the topic for today. I'm like, oh, this is just every day. This is just a normal afternoon. What are you talking about? Hardest day as an entrepreneur. Every day as an entrepreneur is one of the hardest days that you can face. But I can remember, you know, sitting in my office in a construction trailer, and I can remember losing a large contract, a very, very large contract for a municipality, and it was a lawn mowing contract, and it was probably the most difficult contract we ever had in our life. And we had this facility manager who, like, I mean, I'm not kidding you, if there was one blade of grass on that sidewalk, I mean, there would literally be pictures, and we had this 45-minute secure. And so some of these sites were an hour and a half away. And it was like, I'm not kidding you, over a single blade of grass, there would be a return call, and we'd be jamming a truck out there at 7 o'clock at night to go clean up one blade of grass. I'm not kidding you. Like, it was that difficult. And I remember that, you know, we had bought a bunch of equipment for this contract, and we had added new trucks to this equipment. And, you know, this was a major multi-million-dollar contract. And I remember when we lost it, like there was just no way to make this guy happy. I mean, it just wasn't happening. But I remember that, all of that work going away for all of those crews. And some guys like the entrepreneurial journey, how do you make $1 million? Like, that's one of the things we talk about is how do you make $1 million? This was a contract worth over $1 million. I can't remember the exact dollar amount, but you think about like that one contract and how many crews and how many guys, what does it take to put that together? And I remember when we lost the contract, it's not like you can just take those people and put them on another job. You can't. There's no other jobs for them. And you think about that. And when that happens, right, super disappointing. So I think, okay, I'm gonna call them all in one by one, and I'm gonna let them go one by one, and I'm gonna really own this, and I'm gonna really just do this right, and I'm gonna tell them, hey man, I'm sorry, we lost this contract, we're gonna have to, let you go, and there was some people who came in and were like, okay man, I appreciate it, and then there was some people who were like, this is my only job, and they start crying in the thing, and it's like, man, you feel compassion for them, and just like, what do you do? It's super depressing, and then you've got the remainder of the people that come in, and it's like some of them throw things, or some of them knock something off a shelf on their way out, or some of them cuss you out, or some of them tell you they're going to come back and kill you, like that actually happened. Some people say they're going to kill you, and it's like, man, this is just a job. And then you get some of them who go online and, write review. Oh man, this person, blah, blah, blah. It's a bummer. Because the after effects of that can take a long time. And what does it come down to? You really have to look at yourself. Did I fail the team? Did I fail the team? Was the contract too hard? Did we choose something that was too difficult? Could we not do it? Because, back in the day, we used to train like the crew leader takes the last, 10 minutes, and they go around the site and they just look for anything they possibly can, like a loose pop can next to a planter bed, make sure everything's blown off. Like it's somebody's responsibility on site. Somebody goes through it. Back in the day, it was all done by paper, but they've got to check that off. And they've got to say, hey, man, I did my job. Everything's clear. The crew's ready to go. Was it people? Because we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on training. We paid money for uniforms. We had branded trucks. We had like everything that you're supposed to do, right? Sometimes things just don't work out. And at the end of the day, as the owner, it's always your fault. Everybody's always mad at you. Everybody's always saying you failed. And in business, as you grow and scale, like one of the things that you realize is as the owner, you actually have less control over what happens in the business than anybody. You literally have less control than the least paid guy on the team. Because every one of these people on the team makes a huge impact or can do catastrophic damage to any business based on how they show up. So the hardest part about growing a business, the hardest part about scaling a business is people. It's managing people. It's managing expectations because we all have lives, right? And our lives and what happens in our lives affects the business that we work for, our families, so on and so forth. I can tell you a story about walking into the job and having an operations manager under a table shaking because he's having a heroin overdose, or not a heroin overdose, but heroin withdrawals. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. And how do you prepare for that, right? When you're going into the journey,
right?
I think those are the moments that you.
How did that guy pass the drug test? How did that guy pass the background check? Well, he did. So, toughest day as an entrepreneur is every day. Now, this is a great topic because you've been in franchising for the last 13, 14 years. And we're all shooting for that NBA win at the end of the year. We're all shooting for that championship. We're all shooting for that monetary gain. We're all trying to take care of our people. We're all trying to grow a good business. What are some of the toughest days you've seen?
There's obviously, as you mentioned, I always, in franchising, when I was recruiting franchisees, one thing I used to share to them, and it was a good analogy that I got shared to me by a long tenured franchisee at a previous brand I worked for. And he said, especially the first 18 to 24 months when you go into business, and if you've never owned a business, whether you're a young entrepreneur in your late teens, early 20s, getting involved in it. I know you started young, or someone who in franchise world, a lot of people leave their corporate jobs or obviously maybe a mid-management level type job, and they're going into business for the first time, right? And that transition from employee to owner is a lot. I think the biggest thing, you mentioned it, is that it's all the responsibility is on you as the owner. And when problems happen, I think taking that extreme ownership to know it is your fault. It is, because no one else, no employee, even if you're best employees, it's just no one's going to fully understand what the weight of an owner is. It feels, or an entrepreneur feels. And the analogy that was used to me is kind of like the stock market, in those first couple of years, and their mentally, and just moment to moment, the highs and lows. If you focus on what the stock market's doing in any given second, right? It's just pinballing up and down. And over time, obviously, if you see it through, you're measuring goals. And then sometimes there's long-term, seasons, right, of maybe some valleys that you go through as an owner. And I think some of the toughest moments is, when I had some franchisees that were failing, and you get these calls, you get these conversations, and they're just blindsided, where they were in their cash flow or their financials. And I've had those calls where I can't make payroll this week. What do I do? And it's not just even the words, it's when you're hearing that, as a coach, or, even some of these, you care for these people, obviously, and you ride the journey with them, and you just hear in their voice, it's almost this helplessness, and I think in business, it can be a lonely world, going back to, that burden as an employee, no one's going to understand it. It does come down to people if you're scaling the business. And I think I think part of that, and there's a great book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and which you've referenced to me, and in there, there's so many books out there for the recipe for success. And what I love about that book is it talks about the failures and struggles that happen in business, and not just, hey, this is the route to success, but how do you handle failure when it comes, because it always comes. And it may be an employee quitting one day, or maybe it's a sick day, and you're early in your journey, and some of these franchises may have only a staff of 3 or 4. Well, with someone calls out sick that day, that's 25% of your workforce that goes away that day. So how do you adjust in the moment? And I think the hardest conversations is just when there's those moments of epic failures, where they're trying to figure out, how to make ends meet, their family, but they feel the weight of the responsibility of everyone else. You've been in those conversations when that contract went away, and you have to lay off your staff, and you're impacting other lives. And I think that burden, that weight, the weightiness of that, is huge. Even go back to the sports analogy of these owners and how many people, and millions of people, and the criticisms that come from even the PR, from fans. Everyone's got an opinion, of course, but I think that's the hardest moment, is just when there's that failure. And ultimately, I think and every owner, that for the most part, they may be a little bit in denial at times, but overall they know it was them, and they want to analyze. But I think it's also, to overcome that, is realizing that failure will happen, of some kind, whether it's sometimes a small scale, sometimes it's larger, and expecting that, and how do you push through? How do you continue to fight, through that struggle, I think, is what goes through. And they're kind of going back to the analogy of my Denver Nuggets in sports. And I heard a great quote by Nikola Jokic, who's the star player and 2-time MVP of the NBA. And he's a funny guy because he's just so matter of fact, and he's just about the job and the mission, And they just won, the NBA Finals, and usually you see people just going crazy and embracing the trophy, and he just goes. The interview right after, he goes, well, the job is done. I can go home now, and he's just so matter of fact. It was kind of this funny moment. And then during the press conference, they asked him, about the parade. Usually everyone looks forward to the parade a couple of days after the championship. And, he's from Serbia. and he's got a huge, he's just really family oriented and wanted to get back home. And he's been away obviously all year. And then they during the press conference, like, oh, are you looking for the parade? And he goes, when's parade? And the guy goes, oh, Thursday. It's like Monday. And he's like, oh no, I got to go home. Kind of like this, and then we went to the parade and it all worked out. He was happy to go. But one thing he talked about was over the last few years, they went through some adversity. They had players get injured.
Yeah.
They had people, they had some decisions to make. They lost a lot in the playoffs, as you mentioned, 29 and whatever it is, 30, 32 teams roughly of whatever league. There's only one champion. So, 95, 97% of the teams are failures, right? And they failed a lot. And he said, you got to get good. And I think of like us when he was picking this quiz, you got to be good. You got to be bad, and then you got to get good. And when you're good, you have to fail. And when you fail, you learn how to fight through adversity to become the champion and into success. And it's kind of that recipe he was talking about. And I think, man, that's what a cool analogy for business, because sometimes, as you're scaling, there's those little struggles. Sometimes you're trying to figure it out. You make some bad decisions. Then you get to be good, and then you go through failures. Even if you feel like you're at success, you've seen some of the most successful businesses and business owners. I don't care if it's Steve Jobs. I mean, you got some of the most successful businessmen in the history of business, and they've all went through a struggle, and some were pretty significant. And I think it helps them appreciate the success when they get there. And I think it's necessary.
Really good points. The stock market deal, I've never thought of it like the stock market, but that is an excellent point. If for our viewers at home or at business or in the car, take that down. This is like the stock market, and take a good look at the stock market, up and down, the valleys and the highs, right? Because that's so true about how business is. And I think I was on a mastermind call this morning, and I do a mastermind every Tuesday morning at 6:30 a.m. I'm on a mastermind call for an hour. And I've been doing this mastermind for, let's call it 8 months, roughly, give or take a few weeks here or there. And I've never missed a single call. I've never missed a single call because I pay for it. Mm. And today's speaker was a gal that they brought on. And they were talking about, this is all entrepreneurs. So all business owners on the call. And, we're talking about tough things. And they're talking about, when you come home, what is your wife's biggest complaint? So they polled some of the wives of the guys in the mastermind. And there was one common thread that was like, hey, when you come home, you're consumed by your phone. Hey, when you're at home, you're always on your phone. Hey, when you're at home, you're always on your phone. Hey, when you're at home, you're always on your phone. And you got wives who are upset about being on the phone. And I think to myself, and I think about this, and I think about, what is the entrepreneurial journey? And everybody has this idea that on the entrepreneurial journey, being your own business owner, like, you're just going to have success. It's going to be successful. Like, you immediately get to go out and buy Louis Vuitton shoes, and you immediately get to buy a Cadillac, and you immediately move out of the neighborhood that you're in, and you move into the nicest house that you can afford. And you immediately have all of these successes, and you're immediately golfing every morning, and
freedom,
and it's just this amazing life. And I'm going to tell you that working for myself my entire life, only jobs I ever held never lasted more than 3 months. I never had a job more than 3 months in my entire life, and I probably only had 5 of them. Okay, that's no joke. So I've probably only worked for other people in my life not more than 15 months. It says I'm just really hard to get along with. But the fact of the matter is what I'm saying is, along this entrepreneurial journey, there is this idea that you're gonna have everything you want. And you know what? That's a flat out lie. The truth of the matter is, if you're gonna be successful in business, you gotta make sacrifices. And the truth of the matter is that with your significant other, or with your spouse, or your partner, or your kids, or whatever, like, you set that expectation up front. Because guess what? You're gonna miss recitals. I don't care. You're not an employee. You don't have the luxury of saying, I never miss a soccer game. You don't have the luxury of saying, I got to go and see my kids, blah, blah, blah. As the owner of the company, when the stuff hits the fan, it's you. It's you. You're the one who is there. When they're on vacation, just like Todd said, if they're on vacation or they call in sick, guess what? It's you. You know what it is? It's 80 to 100-hour weeks every week. It's 7 days a week every week. When I started my business, the first 3 years I was in business, all I did was work 7 days a week. I managed my crews Mondays through Friday. I did my estimates on Saturdays. I did my paperwork on Sundays. That's entrepreneurship. That is what it takes. And it's hard. And it's disappointing 99% of the time. This is the truth about the hard days. The worst mistake you can ever make is going to business for yourself. I firmly believe this. Like if you want a life of pain and you want a life of trials, you go into business for yourself. Because it's not easy. You're going to have more disappointments. But at the other end, you get something beautiful. You get to create something. You get to build beautiful friendships and relationships. And sometimes the perks of the business enable you to do something great. And my great is give back to community. My great is change the world. My great is donate to charitable causes. When I'm having a really hard day, I think about the causes that we give to, and I think, you know what, this is all worthwhile to me. And those are the game-changing moments. But it's so true. It is the stock market. And you are going to have those downs where it's like, because we all watch the stock market. I love that analogy.
Yep.
The world's going to end.
Yeah.
The stock market's crashed.
Yep.
Well, it kept going.
Yep.
It was
even during pandemic.
Even during pandemic.
Yeah, big
right?
season. Yeah.
So this is the hardest journey that you'll ever go on. 75% of businesses are gone after 15 years, whether they've sold, closed, bankrupted, whatever. Doesn't matter. 15 years gone. That is to be one of those last remaining businesses at that time. Only 17,000 businesses. Interesting. I just saw this study at the Simon Symposium conference I was at. Only 17,000 businesses will ever do $10 million in revenue or more. Wow. I don't even know if that statistic is low. It seems so low. But I saw a guy put it up on his slide. And it's just so interesting that it is so tough to be in business. And so you got to have this mental fortitude. And what I look to is faith. Like, how do I get through these tough times? It's faith. And back to, because I want to finish the story, and I also want Todd to be able to share too. So, like, when I'm on the mastermind call, and it's like, we're talking smack to the guys for being on the phone late at night, I'm thinking to myself, the only reason I'm on the phone is because I'm dealing with
a problem.
Some employee that didn't show up, some employee that quit, some customer that went off the rails, some vendor who did something wrong on a job, right? Like those are typically the main things that happen when you're working after hours. And the smaller your business is and the younger your business is, the less tools you have to deal with those things. And so it's like, we don't want to sit there, I think, and just be on the phone all the time and just this and that. But I think so many times what maybe a spouse doesn't understand, or what people around, friends and family, what they don't understand is that sometimes even after 20 years, you're fighting and you're clawing and you're scratching and grabbing for any resemblance of hope that you can find, that you were fighting and gnashing and grabbing and clawing for success. And all you're doing is trying to push through. Why? So that you can put food in the mouths of your kids, so that you can send them to a good school, so that you can put clothes on their back, so that they can live a better life. Like, our hope as entrepreneurs is that our kids are going to have a better life than we do. I tell my kids all the time, don't be a business owner. Do not do this. Get a job as a lawyer or maybe a doctor. Think about what you want to do, but be very careful in the journey that you pick, because it's not a life of happiness. I was at the Harvard Business School, and they had a old king back from the 14th century, something like that. And And he says he looked back over his life, over 50 years of reigning as king, and he says, I only found 10 days of pure happiness.
There's his journal, right?
Yeah, in a journal, in the journal, and
He was every
I've got
day.
it all in my files and everything. But he says 10 days of happiness, and I've thought about that for years. And you know what I think? I look back at my life, and I look back at the days in my life, and the truth of the matter is, I only have 2 days of pure happiness, and I know exactly what days they were, from top to bottom. This was the greatest day of my life. All these things happened. Do you know I only have 2 of those days? I can only truly look back and remember 2 incredible life-changing days. From the minute I woke up till I went to bed, listening to Ice Cube, This Was a Good Day. Right? Because that's one of my days. And going home. And I can remember those days specifically. And that's the hard thing about hard things. Todd, what do you got for us? I've dropped a lot here.
Yeah, you did. Well, I think, you said it best. I think, one of our core values, and I think a big part of it as an entrepreneur is, what is your why? What is your greatest purpose? We've shared that on this podcast before, but it's, yours is faith, giving back, but what is that why? What is that purpose? Simon Sinek obviously has, made this, a very trending topic, but what is the bigger why for your business? What's all that sacrifice, that time, the hours, the missed recitals, all those things that you're sacrificing. Why? What is the? And it can't just be one thing I have learned in franchising and just being around business owners and entrepreneurs, even like yourself, is it can't just be financial gain. It can't just be money, because money, it doesn't get you the happiness. It doesn't, so what's the other impact? And it could be, hey, I want to send my kids to private school and have a better life, those are good things, but what's the sacrifice? A book by Napoleon Hill is Think and Grow Rich. And, the first thing he says is pick the goal, right? And that goal is in business or personal, like what's the number? He says, put a number on it, right?
Yeah.
And we do that in business all the time. We want to grow by 20% this year.
Right.
We have this million. This is where we want to take the business, to sell it, to whatever we want to do. And he said, but the second question is always the toughest, that separate those who are successful and those aren't. What are you willing to sacrifice to get to that goal or that number? And I think that's, so those tough days are always going to come. And funny enough, I was in my morning devotion today, and you're talking about phones at night, and it was the whole thing. And I thought of you because you've shared this before with me. But it's, it was talking about the first thing in the morning. What are you doing? Is the first thing you do when after your alarm goes off and you click it off, are you pulling that phone and looking at emails, social media? Like, what do you feel in your mind with first thing in the morning? And so I think part of this is mindset. What I love about that book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, he talks about just expect the struggle. And I think it's almost like setting clear expectations for the employee, but not that you want to be negative and pessimistic every day, like, oh man, it's going to suck. It's just knowing that there's going to be struggles to come. And obviously this is right now, as a man of faith, that's a big part of it, is relying on that and trusting that, hey, obviously there's a higher power that's going to help me through it, and thinking that mindset. But it's like, how are we preparing that mind every day as an entrepreneur and as a leader for the day, and I think it does start there, and that's part of the sacrifice. You might have to wake up a little bit earlier to put in that time, because the day's going to get rolling and there's going to be a battle. Sometimes it could be customers, employees. We don't know. Sometimes it's just to expect the unexpected, because we know it's going to hit. And you've shared some of those stories. So I think for us is don't beat yourself up. One thing I have learned is, like, things are going to go wrong, but you are responsible for all the faults and problems in the business. But don't beat yourself up too much, because I think whether it's an NFL franchise, know that every entrepreneur has failed at some point. It could be a day, it could be a moment, it could be a decision, whatever. And then there's failures every day. So it's okay. I think there's that grace on yourself, because most people are the most critical of themselves. And that mindset and that mentality is just going to hurt you, because it can paralyze you. I've seen it. Guys can't move. Literally, I've had entrepreneur discussions, that people can't even get out of bed, they're afraid to go outside because it's just paralyzed. And so it's just that grit. I love that core value of have grit, push through, and guaranteed failure is quitting.
Right.
That's guaranteed failure of the business. But I think those who are successful, whether it's Nikola Jokic talking about winning an NBA championship, or you pushing through and being successful in business, is, I think, perseverance and just knowing that there's going to be failures, and making those decisions are tough, but persevering are those the ones that succeed. That's going to help you. So
forget the past. It's a decaying memory.
And you can't change it.
It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. Forget the past. It's a decaying memory. Anyways, I hope that this has been beneficial. We had like 4 topics that we didn't get to today, but we got so wrapped up in the journey and what it looks like. And the truth is that it's sacrifice. That the tough day is going to be every day. That's the truth. But you got to understand your why. What's your purpose? What are you doing this for? And then you've got to understand sacrifice. But I think the biggest thing that we have to do as entrepreneurs, as leaders, men or women, is that we have to be upfront with our family, with our people about what the expectation is. And then we still have to make time for those people, whether it's a daily, conversation, whether it's a weekly date night, whether it's, hey, I'm only going to sleep 4 hours tonight because I'm going to spend 4 hours playing with my kids. That's the sacrifice.
That's right.
Hey, I'm going to work 24 hours straight. I'm going to work 40 hours straight because I'm going to make the sacrifice for my team, for the people that I'm responsible for. And that's what I love about business, is that we can do something greater. And for me, it's about changing the world. The different ministries and organizations that we can pour into that help us change the world. If you like this, if this was beneficial, give us a like, give us a share. Follow me, David Westcott, on LinkedIn. Follow me on Facebook, Todd Chapman. Follow him on LinkedIn. Hang out with him. Say what's up. Tell him to get some posts out there. I'm just kidding.
True.
I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing.
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. But you got to have fun and you got to enjoy life. Todd, it was a pleasure speaking with you this morning. It was
Likewise.
Great to do this face to face. It was an absolutely fabulous call. Anybody who missed this call is missing out. We're going to be back next week, same time. We're going to have another topic to discuss, and that was real and great. And my biggest takeaway, I learned something today. Business is like the stock market. It's up and down. I think that was a great share from, we call him TC around here, and just a great call. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.